This is George Newbern, the voice of Superman, and you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 352 of the DCAU Review. Hey, that rhymes. I am one of your hosts, Cal. With me, my good friend, good brother, our other host, Liam. Liam, we are continuing in our Elseworlds Finest Month, as I dubbed it. And basically, it just means we're looking at one Dark Knight Elseworld, one Man of Tomorrow or Man of Steel Elseworld, and then we're going to go to an Elseworld that features both of those. But hey, it's a catchy name, and gave me an excuse to pull out and make a new graphic for the month. But welcome to episode 352, as we feature the aforementioned Man of Steel this week on this week's edition of Elseworld's Finest Month.
That's right. Returning to a place we visited just once before, at least on our show, which is, of course, the brand new, or it's not really brand new anymore. It's a couple of years old, a couple seasons old, but My Adventures with Superman, the currently still airing Superman cartoon that's currently on Cartoon Network / Adult Swim that we looked at. We looked at The Adventures of a Normal Man, Part 1, the pilot episode, I believe sometime in the fall last year, and always planned to get back to Part 2, but it hadn't. The stars hadn't aligned yet. But here we are. It's Elseworld's Finest Month, as mentioned, and so here we are, a few months late, with our review of Adventures of a Normal Man, Part 2, as we pick up right where we left off at the end of that first episode.
Yeah, if you want to check that out, it was actually a little bit further back. It was in May. I had to look it up myself, but it was in May of last year. So, I mean, a little, still less than a year, but a little less recent than the fall. So check that out. Episode 311 of the podcast. Amber is not just the color of your energy. If you listen to that episode, it is, check that out if you want to hear our thoughts on the very first part of this episode. But this week we will be covering Part 2, which, even though it's Part 1 and Part 2, clearly you can watch them as individual episodes and still kind of not be completely lost. So that's why we didn't feel too terrible about picking up with Part 2 almost a year later. So here we go, Liam. We will get into this week's review of Adventures of a Normal Man Part 2. But before we do, we will get the official IMDb synopsis for this week's episode, which originally aired on July the 7th, 2023. And of course, before we get that IMDb synopsis, we will remind you that it is brought to you by buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review. That's right, buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review. Head over today if you want to support the podcast. We have multiple different ways to do so. You can support the podcast with a single one-time pledge to support the pod, or you can become a monthly supporter of the podcast. And we have a couple different levels to become a monthly supporter of the pod. You can do so at our basic level. You can kind of jump right in between, or you can join the top tier, which is our Super Friend tier. And the Super Friend tier gets you a bunch of perks. Did I mention every single level actually gets you some perks? You get shout outs on the air, get a little thank you gift mailed out to you, as long as you give us your address, which, by the way, I have a couple supporters that I'm still waiting for addresses. So slide into those buymeacoffee.com DMs or contact us some other way, and we will get you that thank you gift as a thank you for supporting us. But if you become the supporter at the Super Friend tier, you get the really neat perk of being able to ask us a question weekly on the podcast about the episode that we're reviewing, and we will have a question of the week a little bit later in the episode, Liam. We will be talking about some preferences, and not directly, it's kind of like hashtag Cape Movement adjacent, so looking forward to talking a little bit about that. So if you want to join and support the podcast, or maybe you want to join and get your own question answered on the pod, head over to buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review and support the podcast today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this is the synopsis for Adventures of a Normal Man Part 2, which was written by Cynthia Fury, directed by Diana Hu, music by Dominic Lewis and Daniel Future, and animation by Studio Mir. And that synopsis reads as such. Clark returns to the Kent farm with question. I feel like I have to do this like the old kid, the WB guy. Clark returns to the Kent farm with questions of where he's from and who he wants to be. That's such a Smallville WB guy line. Clark returns to the Kent farm with questions about where he's from and who he wants to be. Meanwhile, Lois and Jimmy track down mercenary Livewire and encounter Superman once again.
Wonderful. Great synopsis, actually. That's didn't seem like it was too terribly crowdsourced there. Also wonderful kid, old-timey WB primetime announcer voice. Thumbs up.
Yes, absolutely. This is a very specific reference, but we love a very specific reference.
If you're listening to this podcast, there's a general there's above 50% chance that you'll get that joke and you'll understand the reference. So, yes, we will get into our own plot synopsis minus the WB announcer voice. Although Liam could break it out at any point that he feels like. So be on guard. But yes, we do in fact flash back to start things off. We see a little bit of a younger, not quite young, but younger Jonathan and Martha Kent. And they are out in the middle of a field with a young Clark who, if you recall, we did see a little bit of young Clark. There were some flashbacks in part 1, kind of alluding to him discovering his powers as a youngster. So we kind of pick things up here with Jonathan and Martha doing the old reveal as to just who Clark may in fact be. But of course, they're not quite sure who Clark is or where he came from. They are just simply out in the middle of what appears to be a cornfield. Pa Kent doing a lot of digging and uncovering this very strange object buried in the ground. They let Clark know that he came from the sky, and they're not quite sure where or what sent him there. But as Clark steps on this strange metal platform that is buried in the ground, suddenly pieces of it begin ascending and then kind of rotating around him. And then we get a hologram of a gentleman wearing a very familiar signet. No word on whether or not it means hope on his planet or not, but it certainly is a rather large crest on his chest. He's got an eye patch. I guess we could probably wait to talk about this in visuals, but he kind of looks like Odin from the Thor movies. He's got the giant eye patch and kind of looks like Anthony Hopkins if you squint in animation form.
Hello?
Filo, cum longi arms che faveron, nomo mi chorel.
What's he saying?
I
don't think that's a language from Earth.
Sifarigos con Clara. Atenu, zona se ai verserva. Nerven favia sprech. Netim, fiestasi, and Neros biancas brenu. Kalel, aslane. Kalel, aslane. Kalel, aslane. Kalel, aslane. Kalel,
Krypton.
And so he's there, and he begins speaking in a language that Clark cannot understand. And he keeps repeating the same phrase over and over and over again. Kal-El, 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 with some other philos and some other maybe vaguely Latin or Greek or some lost language phrase. Unfortunately, Clark cannot understand what he's saying and doesn't understand him. And as Clark begins to stand there, the platform begins to shake and things begin to open up, kind of creating this gigantic pit. Martha is off to the side and she begins to slip and fall into the pit. And it's at that point that Clark realizes he has to save his mother. So he quickly dashes over, pulls his mom up, And as Clark steps off the platform, it once again slams shut and everything kind of returns to normal. Clark is very clearly shaken up and makes the statement that he does not want to see the platform again after rushing around using super speed to fill in the hole with dirt again. So then we cut to the present, where we see Lois and Clark and Jimmy fresh off of their celebratory somewhat victory, it seems. If you recall, we left things. They were pitching stuff to Perry White in his office. He's very clearly not amused by them and quite annoyed by them. The three of them, Lois, Clark, and Jimmy, are all interns at the Daily Planet. And clearly with higher aspirations, Lois dreams of being an actual reporter and breaking stories. And she is just absolutely over the moon at this point and obsessed with finding out the identity of this strange man that they're calling Superman. And there's all that they have to go off of, unfortunately, though, is this blurry photo that Jimmy took. Jimmy mentions that he is exactly, he's very clear on who and what this person is. He slaps a crude drawing of a UFO onto this cork board that they've drawn up here to try and come up. I believe Lois refers to it as the murder board.
I made it to help us track leads for our Superman investigation. Who is Superman? I'm thinking he's maybe tied to the military.
Please, Lois, I know what Superman is. Huh?
You think he's a plane?
It kinda looks like a bird.
No! I'm the bird, Flamebird. But who and what is the Superman of Metropolis? He's an alien. Case closed.
Why is it so dark in here?
Wait, don't look! I'm doing a thing! Boom! Case closed.
We need our conclusion to be backed by actual facts, Jimmy. Not whatever Firebird is.
Flamebird, it's my stream, spreading the truth about aliens, and it has 5 followers. Nay, believers. Maybe 6 if you followed me.
Okay, I'm not following your weird bird stream. What I am going to do is find hard evidence to bring to Perry. Like, taking this jacket Superman wore and finding someone who can run his DNA off it.
Lois is very clearly driven at this point, focused on finding out the identity of who the Superman is. They still have this mysterious jacket that he's left behind, and she gets the idea that they can take it someplace and maybe pull some DNA off of it because she wants to know who this man is. And we kind of see Clark nervously pacing around, sort of initially trying to discourage her from finding out who the Superman is. But then he decides, you see a little switch, something clicks in his brain, and he says that he's not feeling well and says that, you know what, it's not the worst idea that she finds out who this Superman is, but he has to excuse himself because he's not feeling well. So he rushes away, and that leaves Lois and Jimmy there to kind of figure out what their next steps are. And they decide that the first thing that they need to do is find out this mysterious woman that was attempting to kill them at the docks, that was responsible for the robot theft attempts. And meanwhile, Superman is on his own sort of mission. Clark is rather headed back to the Kent farm. We do get a little shot of Leslie Willis, the aforementioned woman who attempted to kill Lois and Clark on the docks, and she is walking through the streets of Metropolis, being followed by a couple who follows her into a dark alley, only to not find her. She's able to overcome and knock the couple out. They brandish some very fancy-looking weapons, but Leslie's able to knock them out, and she takes one of their earpieces and talks into it and says, whoever the person is behind this, regardless of what affiliation they are, she wants to meet them. She picks a place out in public at Metropolis Bistro and sets the time for them and advises that they come alone, or she's going to destroy all the technology that she still has that belongs to this group. Meanwhile, we cut to the Kent farm, where Clark is very interested in learning more about who he is, and decides to meet up with the person who would know best, his mom.
Hey, Ma.
Clark, perfect timing. I'm making pie, and your pa is just fretting about leftovers. But there won't be a problem with you home. Wait, why are you home? Did something happen? Are you okay?
I'm fine, but I used my powers to save people, and they saw me.
Oh, Clark.
Look, they don't know it was me, but they know that someone rescued them, and now Lois, there's this girl, Lois, and she's amazing, but now she's calling him Superman, and she wants to know more about him, and I want to know more about him too.
Just slow down. What are you saying?
I need to find out who I am, Ma. I need to go back to the ship.
That's right. So you can go home again, at least in Smallville. So Clark returns to the farm and sort of discusses everything that's gone on as of late, how he used his powers, and how he's a little bit concerned that Lois and Jimmy are now sort of on his trail, and he's afraid that in their search for this so-called Superman, that his secret could be exposed to the world. And so he, along with Ma, goes out to the dirt field where they had buried the strange metal structure that they found when he was a kid in the prologue at the beginning of the episode. And as Clark uncovers the dirt and finds the ship, they notice that it seems to have gotten bigger than it was when he was a kid, and they're a little bit confused by that. And as he stands in the center of it, once again the platform activates, and you see these big floating things sort of shoot up around him, and he goes down into this sort of white void. And we once again see the bearded, eye-patched man talking to Clark in some other language. He's not quite sure what's going on. There's clear that they can't understand, or it's clear that the hologram can understand him, but he cannot understand the hologram. As when Clark sort of mentions as an aside that he does not know where he's from or what is happening, suddenly a vision appears in front of him in this holographic room where he sees what appears to be a war-torn planet, some sort of weapon fired into a yellow sun to turn it red, followed by a lot of wreckage and destruction, laser blasts going on, and then we flash down to a planet that is clearly in distress as we see a woman holding a baby, and then we see the man with the eye patch take the baby from her arms as Clark questions if perhaps this man had stolen him from his mother, but then he sees that they place him in the ship, and he flies off into the sky, and then we see that the woman and the man sort of huddle together as the world explodes around them, which leaves him to the understanding finally that this man is, in fact, it's the Darth Vader moment, as he realizes that he must be his father, and he realizes that he's now seeing the past, and as he begins to ponder what that means for him, there's a big, bright ray of light that envelops him. We'll certainly talk about this in visuals. And as he's enveloped in the light, we see once again that, which we saw in part one, his eyes begin to glow blue, and the S symbol sort of glows onto his chest. And we get a big suit-up sequence here as the suit sort of comes onto him and envelops him. The blue suit, the red cape, the symbol on his chest, the classic Superman look, though, as we see in a few moments, not without some accoutrements needing to be added. But he is now in the full Superman regalia as he emerges from the ship. Or actually, I think that's a little bit later. First, we cut back to Lois and Jimmy, who are going to the salvage docks to try to find the ship that Leslie Willis had stolen back in part one. And although the ship has been shipwrecked, Lois and Jimmy find tracks leading away from the ship towards the sewers, which they follow in. And as they explore the tunnel, Jimmy kind of continues to try to encourage Lois to reach out to Clark to check on him. It's clear that Lois is sort of denies her feelings, or at least expresses concern that maybe Clark doesn't feel the same way she would. And they continue to walk through the sewer tunnels looking for Leslie Willis. We cut sort of to directly above them on the sewer tunnel, and we see that it is lined with very large explosives as they continue to walk through. And at that point, we cut to Willis and her meeting with this mysterious man who has white hair and that happens to be covering one of his eyes. But this guy's got two eyes, so we don't know for sure who it is yet.
Three.
I'm thinking Black Ops. You can always spot the military types.
Oh, I know your history, Leslie Willis. The thief known as...
Let's skip to the only part I care about. I have something you want. You have something I want. Let's trade.
What do you want?
I want off your weird hit list, genius.
You really think you're the smartest person here, don't you? You have no idea what kind of technology you're dealing with.
Then I'd say it's a good thing I planted explosives all over the city, and I'm ready to blow this place sky high.
Go on.
I lifted 10 containers of your tech with the robots. Them? I said come along!
Yeah, that's right. Some interesting foreshadowing. He's also, I mean, again, another visual thing. He seems to have a fondness for a particular pair of colors also that seem to be donning his particular costume. But yeah, they sit there at the aforementioned Metropolis Bistro, and as she walks up and attempts to confront this mysterious gentleman, or actually it's vice versa. She's sitting there waiting. The gentleman finally shows up. We see that there's a bit of some verbal sparring back and forth. She begins to try and question and figure out directly who this person is, and who this mysterious stranger is, and what affiliation he has. Just as they kind of get deeper into their conversation, Lois and Jimmy pop out from the sewers, which is a funny little bit. They had been traveling along, and after finding the explosives, decided to try and escape as quickly as possible. So they pop out, and immediately Leslie recognizes them, thinks that they're affiliated because of their initial run on the docks, that they must be affiliated with this person at the table with her. So she immediately flies off the handle, begins attempting to not only attack Lois and Jimmy, but then this mysterious stranger as well. We do get a cut back to Smallville. Did you mention the additions that Ma Kent decided to put onto the Superman costume also? I don't know if that was...
No, I think that comes in the scene right before he heads back to Metropolis. So.
Right. So Ma is reunited with Clark, who's come back from the being bestowed this brand new look, and while she's impressed, she says that could use a couple of different changes. So she adds a belt and some shorts for modesty, of course. Modesty is a good policy, so got to make it look all nice. I did like that. It's a bit of meta commentary here that we have, which honestly probably a good question of the week. Superman, shorts on, shorts off. What's your call if you're creating your own costume here? Let us know. Either tweet at us. Maybe don't say shorts on, shorts off. Do you like trunks or no trunks? That's the question on your Superman. That is the real question here. It'll also be our poll of the week on Spotify if you're listening. So check out the show notes. You can vote your favorite Superman look. So after Ma Kent gets the additions to Clark's uniform, he mentions that he's still kind of learning about who this person is, him being him. I don't think I mentioned it either, but he did have the confession earlier on where he did admit that, he had kind of publicly been using his powers. So he's kind of, additionally trying to find out just who he is.
I think that does it.
You don't think people will recognize me?
Oh, sweetheart, I barely recognize you.
Clark, that's some getup, huh? Your phone.
I see the detonator. You start taking pictures. I'm gonna stop the explosives from going off.
Wait, Lois, we should...
I have to go. Love you guys.
Clark returns to Metropolis just in time as the battle between this mysterious stranger and Leslie really begins to intensify. This jewel that she has plugged into her spine, it looks like, is giving her some electricity powers and allowing her to manipulate electricity, and is really doing some damage in and around this little public area. Jimmy and Lois are doing their best to stay out of harm's way, and Superman arrives just in time to fight her. Despite initially being somewhat affected by the electricity, he is able to temporarily kind of slow her down, which allows the mysterious stranger to come up and he just banged the jewel, like he hits it with one of his sticks or something, which is attached to the harness. And through this, the power source kind of overloads, it seems, which kind of gives her this supernova type power, and she's kind of turned into this giant ball of electricity, and it's creating this electromagnetic field that's drawing all of these gigantic cars and other things in and around her. So Superman makes the decision at that point, for the betterment of everyone's safety, that he's going to have to go into the actual field and try and stop her. He enters it. Despite immense pain and continually being electrocuted, he is able to subdue her at the last second, bringing her down. And he brings her down to rest on one of the steps where he's met there by Lois and Jimmy, who insist on getting some sort of story from him. He turns around and sees that, unfortunately, Willis is no longer there. She's gone. The mysterious stranger is gone. And it's just Superman, Lois, and Jimmy. So Superman does a very responsible thing here. He doesn't just leave the collateral damage hanging around. He notices the giant mess that everybody was observing from the damage in the scene. And right before this, he receives one of those pesky visions that kind of were plaguing him in part 1, where he sees kind of a flash and what appears to be an invasion into Earth. Still not quite sure what that is or who's responsible for that, but he's able to shake it off before he's able to kind of run around and clean up everything using super speed, put the cars back, fix everything, put some an interesting billboard that mentioned somebody named Amazotech back together, and then is able to fly off, leaving Lois and Jimmy there in their stead. So Lois and Jimmy hurry to the Daily Planet and present their story to Perry, who agrees that they need to stop the presses.
Stop the presses! We've got a new front page story!
You did it, boss.
We did it, partner.
As your partner, I'll only accept this if you call Clark.
I don't know, Jimmy. What if he isn't interested?
Lois, you just helped Superman save the city. Are you really going to let a phone call stop you?
What are you two still doing in my office? Get out!
Oh, it's this thing we did today.
No, don't start telling me. I don't care. Leave. Go. Now.
We cut back to the apartment where Superman arrives back to Clark and Jimmy's apartment, quickly picking up his phone as it's ringing. And it is, in fact, Lois, who he's excited to talk to, but then tries to play cool, who is actually waiting right outside his door. He quickly changes back into his Clark Kent disguise and answers the door. Lois seemingly doesn't even realize that he's up and about and seemingly very healthy, but he quickly covers his story about feeling sick, saying it was something that he ate. She's not even worried about that. She's bragging and talking about how he missed the opportunity to potentially be in the byline because they got the front page of the story, and these two have a little bit of a intimate moment as they sit on the couch together and they begin to kind of longingly talk to each other and looking into each other's eyes. And Clark lays some pretty heavy compliments on Lois, and things seem to be getting on the verge of perhaps sharing a physical kiss at that point. But then who should pop in? It's Jimmy, who literally pops in between them to interrupt them.
I can't believe we pulled it off. I mean, we did, but I can't believe it.
Well, I knew you'd make it happen.
You just wanted on the byline.
No, it's the truth. There was never any doubt in my mind that you'd find Superman. Because you, Lois Lane, are extraordinary. And driven, and smart, and funny, and smart.
You said that already?
Well, I stand by it.
Oh, good. You're both here. You have to see this. Flip gave me an advance copy of tomorrow's paper.
Daily Planet confirms the Superman is real. We made the front page!
Read the byline.
By Cat Grant, Ronnie Troop, and Steve Lombard. What?
And he notes that unfortunately their celebration is going to be even more short-lived. He has a copy, or at least a preview copy, of the next day's Daily Planet featuring their story, but the byline has been given to a bunch of different reporters, not Lois and Jimmy, which upsets them. We then cut back to our live wire. I'm sorry, Leslie Willis, who is strapped to a gurney in a mysterious facility. She's being questioned by somebody on the double-sided glass, and interrogating her, asking her for more information. And the stranger continues to ask her questions, including a bunch of different words kind of strung together that she didn't quite understand. She claims she has no knowledge of what he's talking about, and then realizes she has this electroshock collar on that he continues to shock over and over, demanding information. She demands to know who they are.
I'm not lying.
The Flying Man. Tell us what you know.
He's not with you? Who are you people?
Oh, that's easy, Willis. We're the good guys. Now, tell us everything you know about Superman.
And then we cut to credits. And that's the end of this week's episode. All right, Liam, big picture thoughts here. Plot-wise, this feels like, to me, my first thought was, I feel like this could have been flip-flopped with, I know that the follow-up had to be like the Leslie Willis story wouldn't have made sense if they were following up with something that occurred in part one. But as far as the layering of the Clark backstory and him putting on the suit and all that stuff feels very much like a part one thing that you would find in most Superman cartoons. But for whatever reason, it was chosen to kind of be done here in part two, which isn't a bad thing. It kind of subverts expectations for what you expect for the first part of a pilot. I feel like if you're going to do an origin story or a semi-origin story, but I kind of like that they kind of move things around here and kind of move those pieces around, and you kind of have more of that. Him discovering who he was as a child, and then kind of flash forwarding to this place now where he is in life, where he's kind of accepting and ready to understand more about his origins. Whereas we see he was terrified as a child and, scared of what it meant for him to be labeled as like an alien or an outsider or somebody that wasn't, that was othered or that would be othered or different. He's now kind of more confident as an adult and seeing, really the purpose that Superman played in part one, in saving Lois and Jimmy and saving his friends and creating like this eternal hope for good. And then him kind of needing to understand more about, okay, well, I have these powers and I have this inherent desire to do this. What is it in me that's driving me to want to do this? I need to know more about my backstory. Although he doesn't quite get the answers in this episode. I feel like it's nice that we at least get a launching off point from here for him to kind of explore that more throughout the series.
Yeah, I think it's the truth, justice, and ... American way, better tomorrow, whatever the current version is. Like this is the truth, right? He's seeking to find out who he is. Unlike some other versions of Superman, he hasn't had, all of the training and the Krypton Wikipedia page given to him, at a young age. So he's both sort of simultaneously taking steps out into the real world for the first time, while also just now beginning to understand who he is, why he can do what he can do, and all of that. So I think that's really fascinating as a point of difference between other young Superman stories we may have seen at various points, like Smallville, which I referenced earlier. Having him both be the public hero and still be kind of completely in the dark as to what exactly who he is and what he is in this case is pretty fascinating. And then sort of the simultaneous anxiety of, even though he also wants answers to who this Superman is, he's also sort of simultaneously very anxious and worried about, how Lois and Jimmy would treat him if he if they were to find out who he is and what he can do. So there's also this sort of underlying fear of, if people, it's one thing to want to go out into the world, but if people discover it's me, what does that mean for Clark Kent, which is where the sort of the classic dual identity problem comes in for our hero here. So yeah, I think they set up some good building blocks for Clark here, as he's again, and also just sort of establishes this show's North Star being a little bit different than other takes on Superman we've seen before.
Yeah, so that is interesting. You're also, of course, doing some world building here with kind of laying out what we assume is Task Force X, or a version of Task Force X, some sort of shadowy government who's behind this, person that is hunting down or stalking Leslie and wanting to know who she is. And so you leave some intrigue there, which obviously builds for what's going to come later in the year. You also, of course, you're laying down some. I was kind of shocked by how quickly they were kind of going in on the Lois and Clark romance, and maybe I'm like DCAU brained here with how long it took for that to sort of manifest beyond just sort of general flirtations. Forget like Clark and Lois never happening, but this is Clark and Lois, and it's happening episode 2.
Yes.
So that felt like a very different than what we're used to. So I like it. It's different. It's certainly more akin to I don't know. I mean it makes sense, especially if you're going to be making this Clark character. Like, this Clark character isn't quite, he's clearly, like, I think we talked about it when we did the first episode. He's clearly not completely confident in who he is, but he's a little bit more confident and less of a bumbling fool, but he's not completely matured. He's still a very young person. And this Lois obviously is a very young person too. So it's more of a it feels more of like a teen romance, even though these are two adults that work at a newspaper.
Yeah, it has that quality, I think, of, which is, again, I think, hyper relatable. If you've ever had a crush or that, where you can be very sort of put together in your professional life and even in other aspects of your personal life. Like, the difference between how Clark talks to Jimmy or anyone else or his parents or whoever, and then how he acts, and he's sort of stumbling over his words and almost stuttering whenever he's speaking to Lois. Like, yeah, like love or potential love sort of makes you act a little different, makes you act a little strange sometimes. So I think it's kind of cute the way that they both seem to have that effect on each other simultaneously. Is like, that's a fun little quirk of this, and like you said, going kind of straight into that side of things, as opposed to doing the sort of the tried and true television will they won't they trope is also interesting.
Yeah. So for overall, I think, the episode, as far as action is concerned, it's very much centered on that fight that happens towards the end. So it's very and it's very much lopsided towards the end. I would say it's backloaded as far as the action is concerned. However, I feel like you had so much action, from my recollection. Obviously, it was year ago or so almost since we watched part 1, but I feel like you had so much action in that latter half of part 1 with the robots and Superman fighting the mechanical monsters, as it were, that it makes sense that if this was to be part 1 and part 2, that this has a little bit more of the dialogue and world building, and you have these conversations that are happening between Lois and Jimmy and Clark and his parents, and even Clark and whoever this mysterious eye-patched man is talking to him in a different language. So it does feel like it's a little bit heavier on the talking aspect and a little bit lighter on action. But I do think it moves everything about this show that I've seen thus far. This is the third episode that I've watched. And I feel like it is very much fast-paced and designed for a modern audience that has a very short attention span. So it does move at a clip. I feel like I didn't feel like anything particularly dragged. I think the characters are interesting. I think our story was fine for this week. So I ended up settling on a 6 out of 10 for my plot. I think maybe if you have a little bit more action, it could have maybe been up a point higher. But again, this is technically still the pilot, and you're really doing some general world building here and establishing of characters and motives and some of the things that are going to be built upon as we go into the rest of the first season and then eventually season 2 and season 3 after that. So I think it's okay. It's not a indictment of the episode with a 6. What about you?
Yeah, I went just 1 point higher at a 7. I think this is a good building block along with part 1 that we talked about last week. Like I said, I like sort of the structure thing. Yeah, the introduction of Deathstroke, or Slade, which we'll talk more about in voice acting later, and that sort of sinister reveal as a little bit of an appetite whetter for the rest of the season here, of these sort of puppet masters pulling the strings, and also the idea of like that the technology, which I guess we figure out is Kryptonian related, that when Clark touches it, there's like he starts to get visions, not just from what he finds at the Kent farm, but when he grabs onto the power source on Leslie's suit, he also gets a quick vision. So I think that's interesting, like setting up the relationship between Kryptonians and technology and how they share knowledge and everything is kind of interesting idea as well. So yeah, I was ready for more when this one was done, which I think is a good sign for the pilot or the second part of the 2-part premiere here. So good job by all.
Agreed. All right, Liam, let's move on to our second category, which is going to be animation and visuals. As you mentioned at the top, we have our director Diana Ho, and then we have Studio Mir is responsible for the animation for this week. Kicking things off, I think we definitely talked about this look. Certainly, maybe the most Eastern animation of all of the cartoons that we have reviewed on the pod to date. It is strictly like, I'm not an anime aficionado, would never claim to be, but feels like if you just said, let's do a Superman anime, this is what you would get. So very exaggerated character reactions and big gigantic eyes, and not quite actually, you know what? maybe Teen Titans is a little bit more anime in the way that they kind of do reactions here. This you still get kind of like the blushing cheeks, like the pink colored cheeks with the little lines on them, but you don't get the quite like bug-eyed, like gigantic mouth when somebody's losing their mind, angry or excited about something. So maybe not quite as cartoony. So maybe I correct myself perhaps, but animation, as far as that's concerned, anything stand out to you as far as individual sequences? Or we talked about, we get the Deathstroke or Slade character introduced here. Some really cool foreshadowing with that. I love that they were like, nope, we're not going to give him an eye patch. There's already a guy in this episode that has an eye patch. We're going to just let his hair droop over his eye like he's an emo kid.
Well, it's like like if you do a prequel to a movie where a guy has a limp and like every scene he almost like hurts his leg and then doesn't. You're like, oh, when's he gonna lose that eye? I feel like that should be a recurring gag for Slade. He should almost lose his eye in like every episode of this show for like 5 seasons. I think he does. I think they have already done the the eye injury. But
Okay.
we could have drawn this out even longer.
Sure.
I think towards the end of season 1 that happens. But yeah, that's I like that little fake out they do there. That was clever. Yeah, I mean, speaking of the anime influence, the suit up sequence is super anime. Where the suit sort of envelops him in light and then sort of springs out around him, and it sort of slowly, and we get close-ups of the sleeves appearing on his wrists, and then we cut down to the boots enveloping his feet, and then up to the cape sort of flowing out behind him. Some good hashtag cape movement in this one as well. And then we get the kind of the full reveal of the suit with the glowing S and things on his chest. I like that as like a power up thing. I don't know if that's, I guess that's sort of an electric blue Superman reference for lack of a better term, that like when he's sort of goes into overdrive with his power, he begins to kind of glow this blue electric color. But I liked that a lot. Apparently, it's specifically from an anime called Go Princess Pretty Cure, according to the director Diana Hu, which is apparently that's one of those ones like Akira that I guess gets referenced a lot, because just in DC projects alone, it's been used a few times, including in Green Lantern First Flight and Justice League versus Teen Titans. So. Yeah, a popular suit up sequence, I guess, in the world of anime. So, but yeah, that stands out to me. Yeah, I really like the Krypton sequence there. Like it's not really anything we haven't seen before. Technically, like Clark kind of floating there, watching as the planet is destroyed around him. That kind of happens in like every Superman. But I liked their version of Krypton. That I was interested in the idea of like. Maybe Krypton, that's maybe more of a narrative note, but the way it's visualized here of like, maybe Krypton used to have a yellow sun and it was changed to red. I was like, oh, that's an interesting idea. Yeah. Like where we see some kind of bolt of something fired into the sun and then it sort of begins to glow red. I was like, that's a really interesting, and it makes for a cool visual as well. And then already mentioned, yeah, like I like Slade and all his little weapons there. And then when Livewire kind of goes Super Saiyan, I like that the hair stands up into the more traditional Livewire hairdo. That's kind of a funny idea of like it's literally like the static electricity makes her hair stand up in that pose or that hold. I think is a neat idea and a neat visual gag to pull off. And yeah, that sequence of Superman, kind of flying into her force field and kind of taking on the brunt. This is very much in the vein of Superman the Animated Series, or which itself was in the vein of the Fleischer cartoons. Of this is not a Superman who feels no pain. This is a Superman that can get knocked around and takes punishment from a giant bolt of lightning hitting him in the chest and stuff like this. There's a bit where she like grabs his face and sort of electrify. It looks like his nerve endings are being electrified. It's a pretty interesting visual things that they do there with him sort of being knocked around a little bit, which also again plays into him being an experience. He's literally never, other than those robots in part 1, he's never really fought anything before, at least nothing that could hurt him.
Right.
So it's a new experience for him. So I think that reveal, and I like this idea. It reminded me of there's a I think a cover that it goes viral on like Twitter and Instagram a lot. It's by Jorge Jimenez, one of the great modern DC artists, where you just see Superman's shadow, and then the cover is just all of the citizens of Metropolis looking up at him, and you just kind of see his shadow. And I love the shot of where Lois and Jimmy are about to be crushed by the truck that's flying towards them, and then the shadow just kind of stops moving and we see them look up and we see their reaction and their sort of awe, and then we cut to the first like full reveal of Superman in action, of him holding the truck, and he's got the big smile on his face and the cape is flowing. It's like what a great shot, what a great way to introduce Superman to, we kind of first get to see him through how he kind of immediately inspires this awe in others before we even actually get to see him.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, it is a it's a classic Superman bit, and one that I feel like and this isn't hate. So if you are a Snyder fan, this is not Snyderverse hate, but like the idea that was the biggest, one of the biggest critiques was like this Superman is too dark and broody and gray, and we don't get much of the smiley Superman. So the fact that we get, this is the introduction of this Superman character to the general public is it felt like ripped from a comic book sequence. So yeah, that was I agree, that was a great little bit that they did there. I like they do address the classic Superman bit with how does anybody not recognize Clark Kent as Superman, and it's done by his own mom, which I love, and it's just a line, but obviously you have Superman who's kind of dresses a little preppy. He's got his he's got his sweater vest or his sweater on with the sleeves rolled up and his tie and his glasses, and his hair's kind of down, and then whatever this transformation is that happens, his hair also sort of gets a little volume to it, stands up a little bit, and he walks in, and after his mom has made these adjustments to the suit, and he gives him the shorts, by the way, pro shorts, pro belt on my end here. After she gives him that, he goes, "Are you sure no one's going to recognize me?" And she says, I barely recognize you," which I thought was a great line. And it kind of pairs up with this visual kind of pan up of the entire Superman suit. So yeah, I think that the Superman look is good. I feel like it's a good marriage between that like new 52 suit that kind of comes down and has the little panels that go over his wrists, and obviously the S is a more modern looking S than the classic Siegel and Schuster S, but it's I feel like it's a good amalgamation of a bunch of different Superman designs. So I think it fits well for this as well. I think the final scene too with Leslie Willis in the facility, and you're not quite sure who she's talking to initially because you only see one silhouette behind the glass, but then they give you the shot behind the glass, and we see this mysterious stranger there, and then this woman that's standing next to him, and whoever this other big brute is behind him also, and he kind of reveals that this is much bigger than one person. He does reveal he's Black Ops, by the way, before he hits her in the back of the neck with his baton or whatever. But yeah, very, very interesting that the way that they kind of chose to reveal that this is kind of bigger than just one person or one entity behind this, behind the interrogation and torture of this of Leslie Willis. As far as the rest of the show goes, I think the bit with the bird plane Superman, or bird, it's a bird, it's a plane. No, he's an alien. I thought that having a very It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia like kind of board up there to kind of connect dots and figure out who behind the conspiracy and all that, I thought that was great.
Some good comedy gags when Lois basically commandeers like what is essentially like a file room or something, and declares it their new office, and then there's like dust spilling out of pipes and water spilling from the ceiling, and while she's talking about how great this room is going to be for them, she's like very quickly throwing a bucket on the floor to catch the water and all this stuff. Like there's some good visual comedy in that scene as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. The only other thing, I think I don't remember this from the first episode. I may have cut off the episode before, or maybe just assumed that it was the same for all of them. But I like that the credits, there's unique credits for this show where the montage at the end is all pictures. There's supposedly pictures that Jimmy took from different sequences that happened in the show. They're like still shots from different scenes. So in this one, there's like a scene with them in that room at the beginning. There's a scene with them with Lois and Jimmy, with Perry after they get they get their story on the front page. There's a shot of Clark and the Kents at the Kent farm. There's literally Jimmy like jumping in between Lois and Clark as they sit on the couch and their faces are real close to get together. But that was something that I didn't realize. I don't know if it's was just done for the first two parts or for this part or whatever, but a neat little bit to kind of allow you to kind of stick around, and neat little Easter eggs there you throw in there. You didn't have to do that. You could just roll credits over a black screen if you wanted to, but having a little bit of an extra interesting touch there, I enjoyed that. So, all things considered, I think it's even though it is lacking in sort of action, I think that action sequence is jam packed and has a lot of interesting stuff. As we mentioned, didn't even get to talk about Liam there. They really, really leaned into the red blue blur here. Speaking of Smallville, Superman rushing around cleaning up that little public space after the damage. Just quintessential Superman, like just to drive home that this Superman is a good guy. It's like, I'm not leaving this damaged and messy. I'm going to clean up after myself too, and return things to a semi-normal state here, putting trucks and cars back on the road, and cockeying some of the billboards and stuff like that. So all those for all those reasons, I ended up giving animation visuals, despite it not having a ton of action sequences, a pretty strong 7 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, once again, I'm just 1 point higher. I went 8 out of 10. I think like I said, I think I really appreciated that Krypton sequence a lot, and then the action beats we got are I think are a lot of fun there at the end there. So I like sort of seeing him sort of clumsy his way. And then I like, and this is, I feel like a very modern, like, it is like kind of modern and Reddit-y, I feel a little bit, but he cleans up afterwards.
Yeah.
Which I think it's cute. I think the way they do it is cute. And with a character like Superman, he can do it in 5 seconds. So it is kind of like, and
just
we don't know if he has super hearing yet. So I don't think this version has super hearing yet. So we can't say like he's not ignoring an earthquake on the other side of the world while he cleans up, so he might as well. So,
right.
I like that little like super cleanup, super repair sequence. There is a lot of fun.
That's where we see the Amazo Tech billboard too. By the way, I'm sure some sort of foreshadowing there. Nice little Easter egg.
DC High Volume Batman, The Dark Knight's definitive DC Comics stories, adapted directly for audio for the very first time.
Fear. I have to make them afraid.
He's got a motorcycle. Get after him or I'll have you shot.
You mean blow up the building?
From this moment on, none of you are safe.
New episodes every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be music. And I know that you said 2 names at the beginning, and I attempted to write them down, but I could not. My brain would not work fast enough. Who's responsible for music this week?
Yeah, so we have Dominic Lewis and Daniel Fucher are credited according to the credits of this episode.
All righty. I'd say things that stuck out to me is the fact that we get multiple times throughout the episode the Superman theme plays pretty heroically, both at the beginning, kind of as we have this conversation kind of between Lois and Clark and Jimmy in that room and talking. I think there's a line that I assume that it's Lois that says that he's doing this and not for reward or fame. And it's just kind of this slow zoom in on Clark's face, and you kind of get that heroic Superman theme play. And I don't remember. I'm sure we heard it. It didn't stick out to me to remember what the Superman theme was, but this, I think, as far as Superman themes concerned, I give this a 2 thumbs up. It's hard. It's hard when you have some real stiff competition when it comes to the John Williams, the Shirley Walker. I mean, there are people that are, giant fans of the Hans Zimmer Superman theme too. Like this is a tough category to fit into, to come up with an original Superman theme and make it sound good and stand out as its own piece and not pulling from other ones. And I think that this does a good job at doing that. We get it later on, of course, during the suit up. And then I think at the end, when he arrives, of course, for the first time, and we get the fight fight sequence between him and Leslie. That's it's played there maybe one other time when he's doing the cleanup too. I'm not sure. But I dig it. I think that it's nice that at least for this episode we hear a recurring theme. You're going back to that. It feels like if you're going to have one of the biggest superheroes, if not the biggest superhero ever, he needs to have a memorable theme that gets played over and over again that lets you know when he's doing something heroic, when he's arrived, and it can be played in different ways to communicate different emotion, of course. But I felt like for this episode they did a solid job. That was basically the only musical note that stuck out to me as far as being unique and sounding differently. We do, of course, have some general orchestral stuff that's played throughout, but that's what stuck out to me as far as music is concerned. Anything different from you, or anything you have as far as the Superman theme is concerned?
Yeah, I mean that was basically the long and short of my notes as well for music. I liked, like I said, the way it was used kind of similarly, where you get sort of a grander moment when he suits up and he sort of floats down to hug his mom. You hear it come in there, and then again when he kind of bursts onto the scene to save the day at the end there. So yeah, again, I always like when you play with it a little bit. You play it. You can play it in different keys, different octaves to evoke different emotions from the same notes. Is always I'm always kind of in awe of how composers do that. So yeah, I do quite enjoy this Superman theme again. It's up against some heavy hitters like Superman. I mean, gosh, I think by quantity he might have every other superhero beat as far as like the most like iconic themes. Like again, it's John Williams, it's Shirley Walker, it's Hans Zimmer, it's it's hard for
even the Fleischer cartoons and the radio drama, like they have some really memorable themes. Absolutely. Also. Yeah, hard, tough, stiff
Somebody
competition.
Save Me from by Remy Zero.
Let's go.
All
Let's
equally
go.
Great songs. So yeah, but I mean, yes. So yeah, I think Superman might have the might take the cake, at least in quantity of good to great theme songs. So this one has a lot to come up to it, but I definitely enjoyed how it was utilized in this episode. So I ended up settling on a 6 out of 10 as well.
There you go. All right, Liam, let us move on to our final category of the day, which is going to be our voice actors and actresses. Pretty large, because we have a lot of different ancillary characters and different people popping up and people speaking in languages that we don't really understand. We have a pretty big cast here, so we'll jump into our voice cast and talk about this week's voice actors and actresses.
Absolutely. So I'll mention them up top. Reed Scott is voicing Pod Kent. Folks would know him probably in live action from Veep. He's one of the main advisors to the vice president on that show. Great, smarmy D-bag guy on that show. Incredible actor on that show. Also voiced and believe it or not, this character did have a voice. Onomatopoeia in the recent Batman Caped Crusader show as well. So has a pretty normal speaking voice. So he's kind of putting on. I was trying to think if there's another Pa Kent that has this pronounced of a southern accent that I can think of. This one really put the Kansas into it. I feel like compared to some others.
Yeah, what I love about him for this episode is he's kind of used as the comic relief. In the first scene, there's he and Martha are having a discussion about whether or not it's okay for Clark to be standing out here in the middle of a young Clark to be standing out in the middle of the field. He's like, yeah, he's learning about his past just like everybody else, every other kid, by digging up his childhood spaceship. And then when he later on, after Clark has gone through the suit up and stuff and he's returned, he butts in and he really lays on, oh man, look at the new digs. Like he's real excited about Clark's new outfit. before he interrupts and let him know that his phone is ringing. But yeah, he doesn't have a ton to do here. I also don't remember a more Southern style Clark, but yeah, it seems like it, or Pa, not Clark, but seems like a decent Jonathan Kent from the little bit that we get.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we have Carrie Walgren as Ma Kent. Folks would know her from probably she does a lot of voices on Rick and Morty and a lot of other voice acting. She's also the DC animated movie universe, the Tuckerverse, Starfire as well. Oh. So probably a billion other ancillary voices as well. But I like her as Ma Kent. She kind of gets I think a larger role here, as you mentioned, Pa being more comic relief. She kind of has the role that like Kevin Costner has in Man of Steel, where when Clark is sort of wrestling with the idea that he isn't human, and he's like, "Am I not your son?" And she, she sort of is the one that takes him in her arms and reminds him that nothing is going to change that, which is like such a seminal important thing, even though it's done in a lot of moments. We see it in Superman the Animated Series. A lot of times it is Jonathan being the one, but regardless, to have that moment which I assume can be very real for any kid who finds out they're adopted or one of their parents isn't their birth parent, has that realization, to just have that immediate love and reassurance from his parents in that moment that nothing is going to change, that they're his mom and dad no matter what. And I think again, it's not a ton of dialogue she gets, but Miss Walgren in that scene, and then again her being the one to kind of make the suit or fix up the suit a little bit for him to make it more presentable, and then also that moment where she's kind of stands and watches as he goes back to the ship as an adult, and kind of the fear in her that he won't come back this time, or that something will sort of change him. So there's that moment as well. So I think she does a really good job as again kind of our first crack at this version of Ma Kent.
Yeah, she's solid. I don't have any qualms with anything that she did. I think you nailed it right on the head. She's there to provide the support and reassurance that regardless of what Clark is or where he came from, that first and foremost that he's their son. So yeah, she comes across as very warm, and she plays like a couple of age variations here. We see like, however she's old she's supposed to be when Clark is 8 and maybe early 40s or something like that. And then 10 to 12 years later, so maybe mid 50s or a little bit later. So it came off as authentic regardless of whatever age she was portraying. And I do like that Clark appears to be a bit of a mama's boy. So good for him.
Absolutely. And speaking of which, we'll mention Clark's other dad, his deadbeat hologram dad here, Jason Marnocha, perhaps, playing Jor-El, voiced Megatron on one of the more recent Transformers cartoons. Well, it's tough because he's speaking in a language we don't understand. He's basically speaking gibberish. We do hear Jor-El and Kal-El at moments there, but obviously Clark doesn't know what those words mean yet. Or hasn't grasped that those are names that he's saying. But I will say there's like a little bit of like sweet like kind of sadness to him when he when he sees that Clark can't understand him and doesn't like there's like he only gets a little bit, but I think he does a good job sort of maximizing like he's very imposing and frightening, which would make sense if, when in the scene where Clark's a kid, because that's how a kid would sort of perceive him. Right. And then you kind of, you hear a little softness in his voice, even though it's not English that we're hearing when he's speaking in Kryptonian to him in the later scene as well.
Yeah, again, probably would get an incomplete grade if I had to assign a grade, because it's hard to completely give a plus or a minus on that. But I would agree with you. There does seem to be a change in the tone in the gibberish that he's speaking, the Kryptonian we assume that he's speaking. and kind of softens at least a little bit when he comes to the realization that Clark isn't understanding, no matter how much he screams the same word over and over again, that Clark's not quite coming to grips and understanding it. So yeah, it's a tough role to play, speaking gibberish here. So I imagine we'll get to a point later on in the show where either we get a translator, or maybe he's able to communicate in a language that is translated for us. So we'll put that one in the we'll see column.
Absolutely, and then we get to some of our villains of the piece here. We do have Zara Fazal as Livewire. Apologies if I'm butchering that pronunciation here, but yeah, I mean she has a little she's sort of this desperate, angry person, and she wants out of whatever this strange bit of intrigue she's stuck in, and we kind of see her go through being sort of confident and cocky when she thinks she has Slade dead to rights, and then sort of getting out of control. There's she's got a lot of anger to let out, I think, which is probably a common thing for most versions of Livewire, but I think she does a solid job of what's asked.
Yeah, she's fine. Like I think she communicates. She's very annoyed for like 3/4 of the episode, and then at the end she's initially kind of rebellious, but then has to let out some terrifying screams. I see that she was also in some of the I guess is Death in the Family. Was that the Tuckerverse also technically? I don't remember if that's tied into the Tuckerverse movie or not, but she was in.
I think they used some of the same designs, though. It was
okay.
That original movie because that's based on the Under the Red Hood movie, which was a few years before that. So.
That's right. Yeah. So I think she was. I say that because she was Talia in that apparently, but yeah, she's fine in this. I think yeah, it's different certainly than the DC, very different than the DCAU version of that character, but it's okay. This character is also not a disc jockey, loudmouth disc jockey. She's clearly a more calculated assassin. So. Or not assassin, but like an arms dealer. So seems to fit more with the character. It would be a little bit stranger to have her being boisterous and as talkative as our DCAU version. So yeah, no complaints here.
Absolutely. And then voicing our mysterious Mr. Wilson. I think it works perfectly because it's so anime, because he's doing such an anime English dub villain voice in my mind. Like, this guy is like straight out of, like, again, we didn't really watch Yu-Gi-Oh or Pokemon, but the clips we would see on commercials on Kids WB on Saturday mornings, every villain sounded like this sort of 100%. Weird creep, and voicing this particular weird creep version of Slade Wilson. I think most versions are, but Chris Parnell, Saturday Night Live alum, Dr. Spaceman on 30 Rock, maybe one of the great roles, like a bit part on any sitcom ever, I think. Mm-hmm. Chris Parnell, very funny man, and here he is playing a very creepy, sinister government operative, and you know what? It works. Like, he's really good, I thought. Like, I was like, oh, this guy's a real weird creep.
100% did not, like, completely unrecognizable. Like, did not recognize him as the voice. Was actually curious, like, I was wondering who did his voice. Like, I'm sure now if I go back and hear it, you'll hear some of it, because he does have a unique voice in the way that he usually delivers lines and the cadence that he uses. It seems like for this character, though, it is either turned all the way down, or it's just he was able to disguise it so much that it's just not, like, I did not peg this as Chris Parnell. So I think that's even more, like, impressive to me. He doesn't get a ton of dialogue, obviously, but he is certainly creepy and evil. And that line that he does at the end, that is the pièce de résistance, as he is torturing and shocking the ever-living goodness out of Leslie Willis, and she's begging to know who they are. He goes, we're the good guys, which is just
Yeah.
so good, so good, such a good line. As they continue to torture her. So yeah, it's a tremendous performance by Mr. Parnell. Two thumbs up from me.
Absolutely, and then we'll get to our main three and wrap up quickly. I know we've been going a while, but I do want to give a shout out one scene, but Daryl Brown as Perry White, so funny. Like this, quickly ratcheting up the list of my favorite Perry Whites, I think, in any version of Superman, where he's like, first he gets the picture and he does the stop the presses bit, and then Lois and Jimmy kind of continue on discussing the day, and she's talking about her relationship with Clark, and they sort of pan back to reveal they're still standing in front of Perry, and he's just like, what are you still doing here? Get out. And they start to try to explain it, and he's like, don't explain this to me, get out of my office. Like it's such a simple, like, hard ass boss line, but it's really delivered well. So one scene, a couple funny lines, but I wanted to give him a shout out because he was it really made me laugh. I love that scene.
Yeah, he's great. Comedic relief. He and Pa Kent doing all the comedy for this week's episode, or the majority of the comedy, I guess, other than one of our other big three.
Absolutely. And then I'll probably talk about two of our big three here together since they're so linked in the episode. We have Ishmael Saeed as Jimmy, and Alice Lee as Lois here, who we've talked about previously. They're sort of the investigative duo here. They have a lot of banter, both about Lois's budding interest in Clark, but also her kind of like trying to pull rank on him in a very humorous way, because they're both interns, but she's worked there a few days longer than he and Clark have. So she's calling herself his boss and all that. So they're sort of back and forth throughout the episode is kind of another big source of I think some lightening the mood throughout for sure.
Oh yeah, they're great. The dialogue written for them, and I feel like if you're gonna have this type of witty repartee back and forth between your characters, you have to be able to speak and deliver lines at a certain speed. And whether or not these characters are, I don't know what the recording process looks like, if they're in the studio giving lines back and forth, or if this is edited together. But regardless, it sounds like, they're like brother and sister. They're constantly fighting. He's teasing her about this budding romance or interest in her, hiding it about her interest in Clark. And he's just kind of like this space case that's out here and conspiracy theorist. And he's out there trying to convince her that, that there's aliens walking among them. And, they have, they're doing the investigative work together. So it is this really like, whether it's, brother sister type of relationship, or it's like a buddy cop type thing that they have going back and forth between them, the ability to record those lines and feel like they're just delivering them at a rapid pace. It's like back, forth. It's like a ping pong game. It's like back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. It's really, really good. And it really creates this aura that these characters really do have chemistry and are friends and kind of have this sibling rivalry between the two of them, kind of underlying beneath that. So, great performances by both our voice actors there.
Absolutely. And I specifically love when Jimmy asks her to follow his Flamebird, not legally distinct from YouTube channel, and she responds, "I'm not following your weird bird stream." I thought that was a really that's a great written line, and her delivery, Miss Lee's delivery of it is great as well. But yeah, and then we just have our Superman / Clark Kent to talk about. Jack Quaid, of course, folks know him from his live action work and things like The Boys. He has this real like we said, this is earnest. I think last time I may have used the term himbo for this version of Superman. He's very earnest, and he's very he's got that sort of all shucks quality. But it's almost more like that's more his, rather than that being sort of an act he puts on like the Chris Reeve Superman would, or some of the other Clark Kents we've seen. That's like, oh no, that's kind of that's just sort of his anxiousness when it comes out. That's when you get the sort of stuttering, that sort of thing kind of just spills out of him, especially in this episode. It's manifested in when he's sort of talking with Lois, and he's on the phone there and he's like beating himself up because he's has like a weird phone greeting and things like that. And then also trying to we see him begin to sort of try to differentiate his Superman voice from his Clark voice, which I think is kind of a fun note. Obviously something we've talked about for years with Batman the Animated Series and things like that, where you try to make it a distinctly different voice. Not every Superman actor has to chooses to do that. I don't necessarily think it's such a requirement the way maybe it is for a Batman, but I think it makes sense here when he's specifically talking to like the two people other than his parents who probably know him best in the world, that he's trying to like really and like again what a young person thinks like a put together adult sounds like. So he's just like he just like drops his voice a few octaves and speaks very slowly like so I think there's some fun quirks to his performance here. And then again also him playing off of Miss Walgren as Ma and like we said our other voice actors here. I think he does a good solid job. Again, like would he be my number one Superman across all of these shows? Probably not, but for this version of Superman, this like young anime Superman, I think he's pretty note perfect, at least from what we've heard so far.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just thinking, I was like, this is going to come off as a backhanded compliment, but as far as Nepo babies go, like Jack Quaid is really talented. Like, granted, I tapped out after season 1 of The Boys. I think we talked about that the last time we reviewed one of these shows. It's too dark. I can't. The world's dark enough. I can't. I did not get any enjoyment out of that show. So, that notwithstanding, he's very talented, very clearly talented, and has a lot of inherent talent, whether that's inherited from his dad or from his parents. I don't know, but regardless, it feels like regardless of the role that you put him in, this one clearly it's not just physical acting that he has to do. It's completely his voice acting. It comes across in a way that this character is sort of a little bit unsure of himself, and he is in this space of trying to discover who he is and where he came from, and also put on a bit of confidence in order to try and impress the girl and the people around him, that he is kind of put together. And all of that comes across in that that performance that he's giving here. And as you mentioned, some of it is when he's around his parents, that scene where he's talking with his mom, even after he's come out of that transformation sequence, and he just comes off as just being completely calm and at peace, and he's able to kind of communicate with his parents and feel at home. Like literally he's at home, so he feels at home. Whereas when he's back with Lois in his apartment and he's trying to like give her compliments but still be cool about it, and he's like stumbling over his words and then backtracking, and all of that comes across in the performance that he's able to kind of put into this character. And I cannot imagine that that's very easy to do. So as I said, the most talented Nepo baby of the last, I don't know, 10 to 15 years, maybe. Is it outlandish to say that? Again, not a backhanded compliment. You could take it for what it is. I think it is absolutely meant to be a compliment. Like, Jack Quaid has talent and stands aside regardless of who his parents are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a fascinating conversation, perhaps for another day, of like, it's not always that these folks aren't talented. It's just like, yeah, having that last name helps get you an audition,
100%.
So it's like, but yeah, in this particular case, I'm a big fan of him. I think he's just got it, as the kids said in 1955. So yeah, I think he's like I said, and just like kind of note perfect for this kind of young, stumbling through early adulthood Superman that we have for this show in particular. I think he's very good there. He has this just like real earnestness to him that I think is important for a Superman to have. So all around, I enjoyed our voice cast a little bit. Maybe didn't get as much of our villains as we would have liked for this piece, but I settled on a pretty strong 8 out of 10 for my voice acting score.
Nice. I went with the same exact score with mine also, actually. I went with an 8 out of 10 as well. I think between Mr. Parnell being so unrecognizable as Slade, that final line, and then Mr. Quaid, really pulling off this version of that Superman and the different range of emotions that he has to emote. I think I think really, really strong there. So really, really impressed, and really generally a high score, especially when we're looking at some of these Elseworlds. It's hard to feel like you land on an accurate representation because you're just dropping in. But I think looking at our voice cast here, everybody, supporting cast as well, really great job.
Absolutely.
All right, Liam. Well, that will begin to wrap us up for this week's episode, and totaling everything up on my end here, I end up with a 28 out of 40. What about you?
Yeah, and I guess I'm just 1 point higher at 29 out of 40.
All righty. Again, we talked about it last week. Not going to necessarily say this is a must watch because we're dropping in on a series that we haven't really. I've watched 3 episodes total of this show, so hard for me to say definitively, yeah. But as far as part 2 of the pilot, kind of feels important if you're going to watch this show.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, this is as we talked about. There's so much set up for kind of the movers and shakers. A lot of the villains in this first season are all kind of an extension of this mysterious shadow cabinet that's controlling them with Slade and the others and all that. So it all starts here. Plus, Clark beginning to learn about his past. He gets the suit. This is the first actual Superman appearance in the show. So I think you gotta watch this one for sure if you're going back to the show or if you're watching it for the first time.
Absolutely. All right, Liam. Well, that will begin to wrap us up for this week's episode. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Don't forget, we'd love your support for the podcast. If you liked this week's episode, hey, listen, we talked about it last week. Somebody literally gave us $1 for supporting and saying, you know what? I like when you guys review the Batman. Here's $1. Great. Thank you. We appreciate the support, Lorenzo. Thanks for supporting the podcast.
Absolutely.
Maybe you feel that way about my adventures with Superman. I'm just going to say money talks. If you want to support the podcast and $1 comes our way, that's an extra level of encouragement. Listens is one thing. So if you have other people that are my Adventures with Superman fans, share the podcast with them, tell them to listen, give their thoughts, interact with us. But you know what? $1 certainly wouldn't not discourage us from coming back to this world again in the future. Again, you can check that out at buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review. I am mostly joking. Except I'm not. You can also support the podcast many different ways and let us know. You can also let your voice be heard, $1 or not. Tweet at us at DCAU Review on Twitter. Slide into our DMs on Instagram at DCAU Review. On both of those platforms, we are also on Threads. We are also on Blue Sky. We're also on Facebook. You can check those out. If you interact with us on those, we don't check them as often. We will get back to you if you choose one of those options. Hey, you can also check out YouTube. Check out the show notes. We have links to all of our different things that we're talking about here. Buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review. Our YouTube page, which we are still trying to drive subscribers and get to that all-important number to get us a little vanity link there. So check out the show notes. Subscribe to us. Like the videos. Comment on the video. Maybe that's your choice in how you want to interact with the podcast. Either way, we love hearing from you guys. We love chatting with you. We love your thoughts. I feel like that this being the most recent Superman animated show, we should have more interaction with people and hear your thoughts and opinions, because this is more frequent and more recent than the stuff that we normally talk about. So if you're a fan of this, let us know. Speaking of buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review, as we mentioned at the top, you join our super friend tier. You get the opportunity to ask us a question each and every week about the episode that we will be reviewing. This week's episode does indeed have a question. We have a question from Zach. Zach asks, Liam and Cal, give me your thoughts. What's your preference? We talked about preference before as far as trunks and belt are concerned. But what is your preference when it comes to the Superman insignia being on the back of the cape? So we talked, that obviously is a huge part of the Christopher Reeves version of Superman. I feel like the Death of Superman storyline, our action figures growing up, those Death of Superman, the action figures all had the big yellow S on the back of the cape. So, of course, more modern versions of that character, though, the S is mysteriously gone. Certainly Superman the Animated Series didn't have it. None of the more modern Superman movies have seemed to include it either. So, Liam, what are your thoughts? S or no S when it comes to the cape?
Yes, S, but it's got to be the yellow one. I've seen some other. I think the new 52 suit had like a black S. No, it can't. It has to be the yellow gold, like the gold emblem version, I think, for me to sign off on it. But I think that's pretty classic to me. It doesn't break me if he doesn't have it, but I think I vote yes to the yes. I mess with the yes, but in a positive way.
I knew that there was something there, a mess with the yes comment there. And correct me if I'm wrong, it is not on the My Adventures of Superman costume. So there's no S on the cape.
No, at least not yet.
So I agree. If it's going to be an S, it's got to be the yellow S. It's got to be Death of Superman era Superman S. I'm okay with it not being there. Like I'm not somebody that is gonna die on the hill of not my Superman. They don't have a yellow S on their cape. I appreciate it when it's on there, and I think initially probably when Superman the Animated Series came out, just because our exposure to the Superman character prior to that would have been through those comics that were around the time of Batman the Animated Series and adverts, which were Death of Superman and 0 Hour and all that stuff that were in all the ads for the Batman adventures, and all of those Superman drawings had the yellow S on the back of the cape. So it probably would have felt a little bit weird that it wasn't included on the Superman the Animated Series model, but I'm not somebody that's gonna declare a Superman non-canon if it doesn't have the S on there. So I'm a take it or leave it guy. All right, Liam, well, that will be going to wrap us up for this week's episode. Once again, if you'd like to join Zach in asking a question each and every week, check out buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review and join the Super Friend tier today. Liam, we will wrap things up, believe it or not, next week with our final edition of World's Finest Month, or at least our final entry into this month's World's Finest Month. And we decided, as we alluded to earlier in the episode, we're getting our World's Finest together. We did a Batman show, we did a Superman show. Now we're going to combine forces here and watch what happens here as we tackle one of the more memorable storylines involving both Batman and Superman that was then adapted into animation.
That's right. I'm excited about this one. We are talking about, this is one that I would declare like adjacent DCAU, but not the DC adjacent universe. I don't know. That doesn't really work.
The DC animated.
We need an extra A.
You got the double A. Yeah. So it's DC double AU.
Yes. Yes, because we do have a movie featuring Batman and Superman and Lex Luthor, voiced by Kevin Conroy, Tim Daly, and Clancy Brown, but it is not set in the DCAU. It is instead an adaptation of maybe I think this is like definitely a top 10, if not top 5 favorite comic story from our childhoods.
100%.
That being Jeff Loeb and Ed McGuinness's Superman Batman Public Enemies storyline, where Lex is the president and he six some superpowered folks against the Man of Steel and the Dark Knight. They're declared enemies of the state, and a megamaniacal billionaire who becomes the president, unilaterally declaring random people enemies of the state. Interesting. All right. Well, we'll talk about it next week, I guess.
From reality, reality, you can't escape it. Oh, man. Going to be a blast. Cannot wait to check out Batman Superman Public Enemies with you next week, Liam. It's been a long time coming. It's actually been on... I remember us talking about this way back when as one of the things that we wanted to review. And just 352 episodes got away from us. But it won't get away from us for episode 353. And we hope you'll join us. But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.
DC High Volume Batman. The Dark Knight's definitive DC Comics stories. Adapted directly for audio for the very first time.
Fear. I have to make them afraid.
He's got a motorcycle. Get after him or I'll have you shot.
What do you mean blow up the building?
From this moment on, none of you are safe.
New episodes every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcasts.